Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Hannah if you're new here, and this is a bonus video. This is the video part 2 to all the books I read in February, but the first video was all about all of the books I read by Black authors, and this is all of the books I read by authors of all sorts of other races. But I really wanted to highlight the books by Black authors I read in honor of Black History Month in the United States. So this is everybody else. Again, I'm going to organize this video by genre, so you can click on whichever genre you want to hear about. The first genre I'm going to be talking about is nonfiction, and I read 2 nonfiction books this month. The first book we're going to talk about is Fresh Banana Leaves: Healing Indigenous Landscapes Through Indigenous Practices? I can't quite remember that part. And this is by Dr. Jessica Hernandez. And this is a really interesting take. Part memoir, part indigenous lore, part indigenous science advocacy, I would say, text. Not necessarily the history, but there are historical elements in this. And the main takeaway is people who are suffering from the worst of climate change are the people that are not causing it. And so it's going to be very challenging to change things unless we start listening to those individuals who are most impacted by climate change. And we see this in countless examples over and over and over throughout the world with disasters everywhere. And this is really powerful. I really want to read more books in this vein about environmentalism and how racist the environmentalism movement is, and how we can really listen to indigenous folks who have been caretakers of the land for so long, and they really haven't been listened to this whole time. So I really liked this. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars in terms of its execution, and highly recommend it. The second book I'm going to be talking about is The Heartbeat of Wounded Knee by David Troyer. This is a sort of sweeping history novel detailing the history of the Indigenous American experience from 1890, which was the massacre at Wounded Knee, to the present day. And what I really appreciated about this work is the incorporation of personal stories as well as stories from other Indigenous folk who are currently alive and their experiences. So towards the end of the book, that weaving together was done really, really seamlessly. The first half of the book I had a little bit more trouble with in terms of the breakneck speed at which this history is told, but towards the end I really think the author found his footing. He's also from Minnesota as well as I am, so I love supporting a Minnesota Indigenous author. And this I gave a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I thought this was a really powerful nonfiction as well. 2 romances I read, one I really didn't like, and one that I have very conflicted feelings on. The first one is going to be a volume of manga, which is Fangs, Volume 1 by Billy Balibali, and this just didn't work for me. This is a vampire queer romance series, and I only read the first volume, and this is very explicit. I would almost classify this book as erotica, which is fine, and I didn't have an issue with the explicitness necessarily. I had an issue with like levels of consent. So we've got like an older vampire and a younger vampire, which is already a little weird. He's like just been turned, and this one's hundreds of years old, and the older one kind of uses a charming power to get the other guy to feel comfortable with what's happening, and I didn't like that. I thought that was gross, and so this is just not for me. I ended up giving it like 2 stars. The other romance book we have to talk about is Paris Dalencourt is About to Crumble by Alexis Hall. This is a 4-star read that I am incredibly conflicted about. So we are following Paris Dalencourt's perspective, and he is a man who has undiagnosed crippling anxiety for 300 pages, and you are solely in his head, and he is spiraling constantly, which is incredibly hard to read over and over and over again. And he is on a baking TV show, and he ends up forming a start of a relationship with a contestant named Tarek, who is on the cover. And so, first of all, I again take issue with like minor criticism of Tarek doesn't get his own perspective, and so what that means is we are only getting the white man's point of view in this, and Tarek is Muslim, and he is really conservative, and so doesn't believe in sex before marriage, which in my opinion is fine, but Paris like really questions him on that in a pretty rude way, not very understanding and not very open-minded about it. And so there was that element, and there was less of this, but the idea that the person of color or the man of color has to kind of prop up the character growth of the white man, but that didn't necessarily happen as much, because when Paris hits rock bottom and actually seeks out help, he and Tarek have broken up already, and so Paris is, you know, taking care of himself finally and isn't being prompted to by Tarek. The things that I did love about this book was the baking show competition. This is probably one of the best integrations of the baking show and on top of the romance and how those two were intertwined I have ever read. It is clearly the Great British Bake Off, which I really liked that element. I even liked the side characters, the villain characters. So yeah, I really liked this. It sucks that Paris like literally had to have a fainting spell and have a panic attack and be hospitalized for it in order for him to realize that he needs help. Said he would get better and try to do better and try to help himself, and then he didn't, and it took him 300 pages to do that. So I don't know about this one. So I like Alexis Hall as an author. I think what he does is important, and he really goes there with some of these themes, but it was hard to read. So like I said, the most conflicted 4-star rating I've ever had. Maybe 3.75? I don't know. First, we're gonna very quickly talk about Dawn Shard by Brandon Sanderson. This is book 3.5 in the Stormlight Archive, and you're supposed to read it between book 3 and 4, and I didn't have access to it at the time, so I finally got around to reading this short novel. I'm not even gonna call it a novella. It is a short novel, and I'll just get into it a little bit. This is about our main character, Risen, who during the Stormlight Archive we found out she actually becomes paralyzed due to an accident, and so she finally gets her own adventure. She's a minor character in the larger series, but this is her time to go on an adventure and be the hero, and she's a wheelchair user, and I think Sanderson did an excellent job with the amount of research, the amount of paraplegic individuals he had beta read for him about this particular topic. I thought that was really commendable. I like how she wasn't magically healed in the end. So yeah, this was just like a fun adventure. I think this is probably really important for the larger Cosmere implications and the Stormlight Archive in general, but like we're still kind of waiting to see how all of these pieces fit together. So I'm still like, I don't really know how this fits into the larger anything other than just being a good adventure and like hinting at things, you know what I mean? So I ended up giving this 4 stars. I liked it. I really liked the disability representation, but like I'll probably, once we get all the answers, if I go back and reread all these things, I'm gonna be like, oh, so he was hinting at these things in all these side books and whatnot. Then we have 2 T. Kingfisher books. We have A Minor Mage, which is a middle grade story that is incredibly dark. So it's about a 12-year-old character who lives in a village where there's a pretty serious drought. And the main character, his name is Oliver. Oliver gets kicked out by his village to go get the rain from the Sky Tribe, the cloud herders in the mountains who are holding the rain hostage, essentially. And because he's like a magician and knows 3 spells, he's like the most qualified to go off an adventure on his own. And he has an armadillo, talking armadillo companion, which is super cute. And this is just a fun adventure, but I will say this is incredibly dark. Like, Oliver ends up in some pretty serious scrapes and kills people in self-defense, but still. He gets captured a few times. He's really in tough situations. So like, parents, I would maybe read this before you give it to your, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, but like, I think they'd be able to handle it. It's just, that's up to you. I actually gave this one 3.75 stars because I wanted to be technical, I guess. A 4.25 star book was 9 Goblins by T. Kingfisher. And this is about a company of goblins who are in the middle of a battle and they end up getting transported behind enemy lines and they are trying to make their way home. We're also following a elf character who basically is an elf veterinarian, and he rehabilitates animals in the woods, and he's kind of a hermit. He lives by himself. And so we're kind of following these 2 storylines, and then eventually they meet and have a little bit of an adventure. And this has the signature T. Kingfisher, like, whimsical, silly writing and sense of humor, but this is like about the atrocities of war and how horrible war is and how it affects not only the soldiers on the front lines, but those at home. And I don't, again, want to give things away, but this is also super dark. So it's interesting, like, tonally, it's very, like, light and whimsical and fun, but it again deals with some pretty heavy stuff. So I really liked it. I think T. Kingfisher does a really great job balancing that in all of her works that I've read so far. And I think 9 Goblins is particularly well done, and I gave it 4.25 stars because, again, I, for some reason, want to use 0.25 stars now. And I just completed Age of Myth by Michael J. Sullivan. I actually have a vlog where I talk about some of these books, so look for that. But I just finished this last night, and this is a 4.5 stars. I'll be honest, I'm really selective with what books I pick up that are classic high fantasy written by middle-aged white men. I'll be real. I've been burned before with like the sexism and even like racism in books, and I just don't want to read any of that. And I thought this was pretty good. This was really good, and I'm glad I took a chance on this book and this author. We're following a cast of characters at the beginning of pretty intense conflict between essentially an elf-like race and the humans. And I really, really liked this. I liked all the characters. I liked the plot. This was a little bit more plot driven than my personal tastes, but this had enough political intrigue, had enough interest in the characters that I really, really liked this. I enjoyed the reveals at the end, which I actually didn't see coming, and this was a pretty good start to a series. I will say this does feel like quite a bit of setup, but if you're looking for like a classic multi-point of view, sweeping cast of characters, fantasy that has themes of like rebellion and war and different races of magical beings versus humans, I actually really recommend this. Lastly, my one sci-fi read was Artificial Condition by Martha Wells, which is the Murderbot Diaries book 2. And I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. I liked this even better than the first one. Murderbot is on the run and encounters another ship. A ship that has, you know, consciousness, and the two of them become kind of friends, which melted my heart so much. And Murderbot is again on another adventure trying to, how do I say this without spoiling things? Save some humans who are in trouble, just like it does, as well as kind of discover some things about itself and its past. And I loved this. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I will be continuing. I had such a good reading month, and I hope you can see that in my face, and I hope you all had an excellent reading month as well. And I will see you in another video of mine very soon. Bye.